Hi everyone. So in this next follow-up video, we will basically continue our journey on the rental order and write some tests for the data model. So after in the last video, we actually created the data model, and let's now take a look at what has to be done in order to validate that we actually did all this stuff right. Perhaps there's one thing that I want to additionally add here, which would be that we want to check the instance name method that we have created. So let's say we will create an order, or let's say instance name test order. Okay, so let's go ahead here. We will start out with our just regular test setup. We have already things to basically copy from. So let me first just create a new package which we'll call order, and then we can go ahead here and basically copy the product validation test and say this will be now order validation test. And actually what we can do is to replace all the occurrences of product with order and do that for uppercase and lowercase. So this is that we have like a starting point on testing our validation. So the first thing is given valid order. So the valid order would be set order date, and I will just set just regular order date. We can perhaps even make that a field to say today. And actually it does not need to be defined here, but we can actually do it at the very front. And probably what we also need is yesterday, and this will be then today minus days 1. And we can probably also make that final. And so then the next thing would be to say order set customer, and here we will just create a customer class. So let's give that a go and see if this already works. So this means that we do not have any violation. And if this is the case, then we can take a look at the second test case, which would be not without name, but without order date. Okay, so the first test will actually work. So let's go ahead and create the next one. I will just copy the data setup here over and say this will be null. And then actually let's take a look if at least the size here is 1. And I think we had in some other tests actually better checks. Yeah, here it's actually, so we not only check on 1, but we also check on the outcome. So let's copy that over here as well. And then we will just say, let's call it just validation, and then hopefully it's not on unit but on order date, but still it should be not null. I was just thinking what we can probably do is actually we could leverage this validation verification in order to not do this all the time. But let's just brainstorm here a little bit. What we could do is to say so I'm not 100% sure on how to do that better, because normally I tend to have these, or I like to have these assert statements here, and not in some helper method or bean that actually does something for us. Perhaps let's take a look if we find something else later. for now, I think we can just continue. So the next test would be that not without an order date, but what we actually configured as well is that the order date needs to be today or in the future. So what we could do is to say we want to check for yesterday, and then just see if there's still a violation happening. And if this is the case, then we already know that our second annotation also works. And in this case, it doesn't work because I took the wrong error type, because it's now future or present. So let's just run that. And yeah, I think in the meantime, we can already think about the next one, which would be not without order date, but without customer. And here we say once again today, because it should be the correct value. And this one would then be customer, and it should hopefully be not null as well. Okay, so this looks quite good. And now we have the same thing to do for our order line item. Let me just take a look, because here we have already a similar thing. Product price validation. This is also one-to-many association or composition actually. Let's take a look. Okay, so actually the test doesn't really make any difference, because we directly interact with this product price object. So this means we can also just copy over this one here and create an order line validation. And let's just do the replacement here as well. Okay. So the first thing is that probably we don't need all of this anymore. A valid order line. So what makes actually a valid order line? We have a reference to a stock item which should not be null, and we have an order which should not be null. We have a start date and end date that should not be null as well, and should also be in the future or present. So there are a couple of more validations, but yeah, so then perhaps let's actually keep the dates here and just make them local date time. Or we could even now say this is now. Okay, so this means here, so the first thing that we have to do is to say set order. Here we will just create an order class reference in order to get this one right. So then the second thing would be set stock item. Here we need to have a stock item in place. And then we have set starts at, and this would be, for example, now. And then set ends at, and this would be perhaps not yesterday, but actually let's do tomorrow plus days 1, and then we can do it like this, and hopefully we don't have any violation. So let's check that if this is the case. Okay, so actually we do have a violation. So let's take a look once again at the order line. What am I missing here? So we have a stock item which should not be null. We have an order which should not be null. And we have start and end at and both of those should not be null. So let's yeah, so I didn't expect anything to happen here, but we can double check. So here we have our validations, and these violations are saying that it should be in the future or present for the starts at. And right now I'm not 100% sure why this happens, because when it says now, it should actually work just fine. Well, yeah, actually there might be a timing difference. So when we create this instance in particular here, since we now put it into this this class definition and immediately create that, it actually means that the time, like at the point in time when we run these violations or these validations, this is already the past. So this means what we could, yeah, for example, do plus minutes would be 1, and just rerun it again in order to see that this is actually the error. Okay, yeah, so it has really something to do with the timing. I mean, we could also plus seconds 5 or something, you know, just have it almost at now. Okay, but this means we have now achieved our very first test, and let's go to the second one here and say order line without an order, for example. This should fail, and let's copy those over here once again. And since these are a couple of more attributes, I will now separate this here once again in order to see it better. So this would be order, and it should not be null. Okay. Yeah, okay, so this already works. I mean, we can now go ahead and do that for all the remaining tests. I think this should be not of a big of a problem. Just copy this over here once again, and then we will say stock item is actually null. So I will just run all of those. Okay, so first of all, we have here stock item. This is correct, but this other thing should actually not have failed from my understanding. Okay, so this seems we already introduced once again a little bit of flakiness here, and I think this is once again related to the fact of this this timing issue. So let's actually, you know, it doesn't really matter what we said here. What we could also just say is to say that it should be tomorrow by default, and or, you know, just take it as now, but we actually will not use now anymore, but we say it starts today and ends, or it starts tomorrow and ends in 2 days, basically. And let me just copy this over here so that we'll never get a problem with this timing anymore. Okay, I will rerun that a couple of times to see that it's actually now fine. Okay, yeah, so this seems to be now valid. Yeah, then the next thing what we can also do here is to check on this in the past. So this means here we will just copy over from our initial test where it's valid, and then we will say okay, so this should work here as well. Okay, so then we will just copy that over for the ends at. And this will now actually doesn't really make sense because right now we have this this violation. Like there's actually a semantic violation here that the end date should not be before the start date. So I think we can tackle that in a different video to write a test for that, and even also a validation for that. But for now, just in order to check on this validation here in isolation, this ends at future or present, this should be fine to do it like this. But probably we'll have to rework this test case once we introduce this other violation. Okay, and then the last remaining two parts are just to check that these that in case that it is not present. So this means we will just pass null. And I think with that we have covered all the scenarios. And as you can see, now we have already a lot of tests that actually have this very same pattern here and check on the very same thing. So probably it's good at some point to refactor that and make that even easier to work with. Okay, so let's actually now we have created our first two test cases here for the order line validation and the order validation. I think I will just make those two tests in another video so that the video doesn't get too long. But I think with that we already achieved the first part of this. Okay, so let's just run the CI system, and for now I will just close this video, and then in the next one we will follow up on this topic. Thanks for watching and see you next time.